Welcome to Flashpoints. I'm Margaret Brennan here in the CBS newsroom with Juan Zarate, our national security analyst. Juan, always good to talk to you.
Great to see you, Margaret.
Good to see you. There are a lot of flashpoints right now in Europe, particularly centered around what to do with Ukraine. You had a pickup in violence this week, that fatal burning down of a building in Odessa. Unclear who carried that out, but you had Vladimir Putin come out and say, because of what's happening on the ground, it looks like diplomacy is dead at this point.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Well, the violence is creeping further and further into the center of the Ukraine. Odessa, the third largest city in the Ukraine, has been largely peaceful. Now the center of a lot of conflict, dozens killed, burning the building, as you mentioned. You've also had Ukrainian helicopters shot down. So the conflict's not getting better, it's getting worse. And you have the Russians clearly articulating the right to intervene and calling on the Ukrainians to stop their offensive, as they call it, against the pro-Russian militants. All of this then circling around some key dates. May 9th, this Friday, is Victory Day, a key day in Soviet Union's lore, the victory over the Nazis. And that now has become part of a challenge and a debate for the security services in the Ukraine, because they want to cancel any celebrations, but in canceling those celebrations, they may be exacerbating the tensions around the nationalist fervor for the pro-Russian militants. So this is not getting any better, Margaret, and the diplomatic tools and sanctions that have been applied really haven't affected Putin's calculus. They're still acting as provocateurs in this conflict.
Another key date, the elections on May the 25th. The U.S. and Europe, Germany and the U.S. have said we will hit harder with sanctions if there's interference in that election in Kiev. Today, you have the Russian foreign minister saying, well, there's a lot of instability, and when there's an offensive on the ground, you couldn't have an election.
Right.
So is Russia basically achieving its ends without having to carry out an invasion?
I think absolutely, and you've seen this as part of the Putin strategy, which is use the threat of military force to influence, use provocateurs and special forces and intelligence operatives to infiltrate and to help the pro-Russian locals on the ground. That happened in Crimea. He denied it, remember, but that obviously came to pass. And certainly that's what's happening now. And all along, we've known that they've been trying to foment instability in Kiev, and certainly don't want to see a legitimate and widely recognized election move Kiev forward, and certainly move it toward the west. And I think they are, with the provocation, certainly with some of the violence in Odessa now, starting to achieve some of their goals and creating a real question as to whether or not elections can happen effectively and efficiently on May 25th.
So what actual tools are left in the American toolbox or the European one if they actually want to choose to use them?
Well, I think everyone has talked about the economic sanctions and financial measures as the principal tool, and some have been applied. We've had waves of lists from the U.S. and Europe. The assessment by most analysts is those have been largely meek. They haven't presented sectoral sanctions, and so that would be where we use trade-based sanctions to go after, for example, Russian oil and gas sector, or their banking sector, or their mining industry, or importantly, their defense sector. I think what you have, though, is the problem of Europe not wanting to be overly aggressive, not wanting to provocate Putin in some ways, but also not wanting to cut off their nose to spite their face, given their economic reliance on Russia. And so you've seen a much more measured approach here, and frankly an approach that unfortunately has been dictated by what Russia does. And so the sanctions don't appear to be a financial campaign, but instead a step-by-step process in reaction to what Russia does. And I think at the end of the day, that makes a much less effective process.
Those sanctions have punished, but they don't seem to have deterred Putin at this point from what you're seeing on the ground.
That's right.
Interesting to see what the sanctions are. David Cohen will get done when he's in Europe this week, talking to some of those Europeans.
That's right. Treasury at the center of this.
See if they can. I'm sure you do. Meantime, this has been Flashpoints. Always good to talk to you, Juan.
Likewise, Margaret.
Thanks for watching.